JCFS Winnipeg has shared with us. But I want to just welcome everyone for being here tonight and with us. And I also want to read a bio. So we have Dorit Kosmin, who's with us.
Just check, Alexis, you're sharing your screen now. We don't need to share just yet.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't have to share yet? Okay.
Not yet. No.
Okay. I was being
I'll cue you.
very prepared.
Sorry for the interruption.
Casual kind of thing. So we have Dorit Kosmin with us, and so she has a master's degree in social work from Yeshiva University's Wurlitzer School of Social Work. She is also a student at the University of Winnipeg in the spiritual health program. She's worked with Holocaust survivors, refugees communities, Jewish teens, death row inmates, and now with adults struggling with addictions. In all of her work, she has found that the most significant part of connecting to clients is the ability to actively listen. When someone feels that they are being listened to, they can say things that change the trajectory of lives. In her work with JCFS clients who are overcoming dependency on substances or problematic behaviors, Dorit uses Jewish wisdom, spiritual and cultural, to encourage clients to find the purpose and meaning that brings them closer to their own wellness. Dorit lives with her husband, 5 children, a dog, and a cat who inspire her each and every day. And we also have Al Benarroch with us. And so Al is the executive director of JCFS Winnipeg. He holds a honors BA in psychology, a master's in clinical psychology. Al was in private practice for 10 years before taking the position of clinical director at JCFS Winnipeg in 1999. In 2014, Al stepped into the role of the executive director and has moved JCFS into the future by growing programming through new and innovative planning, like the addictions work. Prior to starting at JCFS Winnipeg, Al was in private practice for 10 years and focused his clinical work exclusively in and with Indigenous peoples and communities throughout Manitoba. Al's graduate research focused on health psychology and mental illness. Al has been dedicated to keeping the agency true to its core values in all areas of service. Outside of work, Al is involved in many aspects of community life, sitting on various community boards and committees, both within and outside the Jewish community. He is very active in synagogue and ritual life, and he is a spiritual lay leader. Al is a father of 2 adult daughters and is having a second go at parenting his twin 9-year-old nieces, which is a story for another time. But I do want to welcome everyone here. I want to welcome our friends, Al and Dorit, to be speaking on this very important topic about addictions. It is something that I do not run across the conversation about addictions in my work much at JCFS Hamilton, but JFS Hamilton, oops. But I know it exists. And so when I am curious about something, I turn to a source of knowledge. And I will say in my position at JFS in Hamilton, Al has been a mentor and a good friend, and also has been an incredible source of knowledge. So I really hope that people pay attention to this amazing work that Winnipeg is doing and ask lots of questions about this. And I'm going to turn it over.
All right, thank you, Alexis. I do want to do a treaty land acknowledgement. Thank you for having us here. And with the power of Zoom, we have to do some multiple acknowledgements here. So here in Winnipeg, particularly where I'm sitting right now in my office, we sit on Treaty 1 lands. It's the ancestral land of the Cree, Oji-Cree, Anishinaabe, and Dene people, the homeland of the Métis Nation. And so we always acknowledge them. And I just did a thank you to Google, a quick search that Hamilton sits on the lands of the Erie, Neutral, Huron, Wendat, got to pronounce this one, Haudenosaunee, and Mississaugas. So I think we always have to acknowledge our Indigenous partners, brothers and sisters, and the land that we are upon that belongs to them, and that we're here essentially occupying. So we thank them for allowing us now to do that. What I want to do this evening, of course, I love bragging about our programs in Winnipeg, but I'm not here to do that. What I'm here to do is I really want to share our journey, which, you know, in my work in the Jewish Family Service Network is really a journey that I've heard from many other communities, particularly in the US. And I always say we're about a generation behind in Canada in the work we're doing. So we're getting there. But this is something that that started very dear to heart, probably around 2008, when we were doing some soft work in this area. We weren't doing nothing formally, but two individuals came into my office at that time here at Jewish Child and Family. And one was the father of a recovering addict, and the other was his good friend who spearheaded the meeting. And he sat down in my office saying that, here's my son, a Jewish man, strongly identifies with Judaism and is attending recovery work, which is saving his life in church basements. And he's sitting in an environment where somehow it just doesn't gel with his upbringing and his cultural roots. And the real question was a call to action was, what is our Jewish community doing about that? And I happen to have some experience, and my late father-in-law, who had 40 years of recovery in AA under his belt, who was very proactive and a consultant for me, we had lots of talks about that. And it started to launch the work here in Winnipeg. But before I start getting into a bit of our journey, I'm going to talk a bit about that. Dorit will then talk a little bit about the actual work that we do, how we actually work with clients, and really the Jewish perspective and the Jewish lens that we bring to it. That's something that we overlay in our work, is of course we're doing best practice work, but we focus on the Jewish perspective and the Jewish piece. Otherwise, we're just duplicating what's going on out there in the community. And even before we do all of that, I do want to share with you a video, and we'll be very mindful of the time. If Alexis can cue up a video, this is a video that we did. It's about, I think, 11 or 12 minutes. We showed it at our 2018 gala, where we raised almost $500,000 towards addiction and mental health work in our community. And we profiled a few of our clients who were very gracious in sharing their stories. Go ahead. You have to click the little ticky box, Alexis, at the bottom of share screen. You stop sharing. Now, when you click share screen, at the very bottom, there's a little share audio.
Opiate withdrawal is the most agonizing, unbearable torment there is. I would know. I had to go through it in prison, in a suicide watch cell for four goddamn days because of a police officer took a bit too long to fill out a goddamn form.
On Monday, we met with Nolan and his whole family to just sort of reinforce that as of April 1st, he's not going to be living in the house anymore. In the Jewish community, there is a little bit of stigma still about mental illness and substance use disorder or addiction. Oftentimes, Jewish people who are struggling with things like this are left to look outside the community, not because the resources don't exist within the community, but, God forbid someone should find out.
It's hard to. I'll feel better after I get my methadone.
How'd you
I
get
don't know why I
started
say
on
that.
methadone?
I'm so used to just not socializing until I get my methadone.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's not a joke. It's not fun when you can't control yourself. I'm still figuring this all out, right? Like, as it happens, but that's kind of what meth withdrawal is like. No one truly understands meth addiction. Nobody. Unless you've lived it, you can't understand it. It at times feels like, at least for the drugs I was using, which essentially were methamphetamine and benzodiazepines. The combination of those, along with opiates, for me, my methadone, was is what created a very dangerous cycle that I found myself trapped in.
The commitment to creating awareness is probably one of the top priorities at Jewish Child and Family Services as far as mental health and addiction goes. Dealing with these problems within the community, in my opinion, is the healthiest and most effective way to create change and to promote healing.
When I started seeing Carly, I was kind of a mess, and like she could see that, but she was there for me. Like she was there for me the whole time. She saved my life in a big way. That's the reality of it. She really did. I can't always focus on one thought. I really can't even think past the end of the day. JCFS has been hugely important for me. You've all been so good to me. Everything about JCFS represents love and understanding and positivity. Running is a huge thing for me, always on the treadmill. And because I can control my pace. And just with weights, it's just the adrenaline and the testosterone, all that stuff just flowing through your body. It just feels great. That's the high. I always love the high of working out. I work really hard in there, but I don't have anything to prove to anyone but myself. So I've just been more comfortable lately.
I had moved into an apartment, and I thought that I heard a baby crying, and I thought that someone was beating a baby. And so I don't know, I think I told my aunt or something, and she believed me. And it wasn't true, right? It was just a hallucination or a delusion. With the bipolar, it's like sometimes you're high, sometimes you're low, and so on. But with schizophrenia, it gets a bad rap because people say, oh, you're being paranoid. And with schizophrenia, a large part of it is the paranoia. So, for example, I couldn't go into a cafe or a restaurant by myself because I was afraid that people were talking about me. If I was to go into a cafe and people were laughing, they were laughing at me. I first met Judy Plotkin about 14 years ago. She was my new worker. She came up with the idea of this wellness group on her own, and people really enjoy it. They enjoy coming. We enjoy interacting with each other. We enjoy doing things, you know, different things in the gym, or going to, say, the art gallery for a guided tour. Things that maybe we couldn't afford to do on our own, but Jewish Child will pay for it. Oh, that sounds bad. But anyway, counseling is more with Dr. Croft. She's my psychiatrist, and I can talk to her about what's going on in my mind, and she can say, okay, Joan, I think you're not feeling well. I think you're sick. I think we need to put you in the hospital. So she's the person really that does the counseling. She knows what signs to look for. She knows to say, okay, Joan, I think you're paranoid, or I think none of this stuff is happening, it's all in your head. Being mentally ill does not make you a lesser person, and people should try and give you some understanding that, you know, it could happen to anybody. And I think the important thing is to reach out, or to have other people reach out to you and to help you gain your footing again. And that's definitely what's happened here at Jewish Child.
I started using drugs and alcohol at the age of 15. I think by the time I had graduated university, I definitely knew the drugs were a problem because I couldn't continue with my university. I had a chance to go to graduate school. The drug use always led to very serious depressions. I went to China in 2002. I'm a teacher. I teach English as a second language, and I administer tests, even currently. But I was in China for about almost 7 years, living in Beijing, and had secured a very, very good position in the university there. I became very sick physically and mentally and emotionally. It was about 210 pounds to 168 pounds. And I didn't know what was happening. I had no energy to teach. I had no confidence to teach. I couldn't focus mentally on my job, and I tried to put on weight. I couldn't put on weight. I didn't know what was going on, and with that came all the depression, because I thought, if I can't teach and I can't stay here, then I have to go back to Canada. I tried to get help in China, in Hong Kong. They couldn't figure out what was wrong with me. I had to come back to Winnipeg. My family was crazy. They were trying to help me. I was phoning them. I was in a panic. I was hysterical. They didn't know what to do. My sister, who lives in Jerusalem, contacted Jewish Child and Family, asked them if they could help. Things went in motion. My uncle, my mother's brother from Palm Springs, flew to China. I was incapable of coming back by myself. Jewish Child and Family arranged for the mobile crisis unit to meet me at the airport. Where was I going to go? Probably being admitted to the hospital would have been a difficult thing. So they got me to the crisis unit. From the crisis unit, they got me into the hospital. So that was my first contact with Jewish Child and Family, and you know, it was a blessing that they were able to arrange that. If the JCFS can build mental health, a community that can help people, very important, very, very important. Addiction, dealing with addiction, I know firsthand. I know a lot more about it. There's the treatment centers here. There's a lack of treatment centers, and there's a lack of recovery houses, and there's people dying out there, and we need more. So anything that can be done by JCFS to help both situations, very important.
Helping others helps me. But I will never forget the counselors who got through to me and who saved my life.
So again, I mean, that's a very powerful video, and those are real stories, real people. And it's amazing how much has actually changed even since we aired that video, because Nolan did have a relapse at that time, but he has had periods ever since of really, really good functioning, to the point where he has worked and volunteered in other recovery houses and provided supports to others. And that's the nature of addiction and recovery. It ebbs and flows. There's periods of stress when you have to fight those demons and try to find and work on those skill sets for being able to combat those. negative behavioral patterns and the physiological patterns that drive a person to addiction as the way of coping. So and ideally we do those during periods of good stability, right? So those are three really good examples. Of course, that was a video that was for mental health and addictions, and we had Joan in there. Joan's one of our superstars. She's really worked hard on her mental health recovery, but so many of the tools are the same. So I'm just going to run through here. I'm going to go as quickly as possible. I want to sort of give you a history of what we've done and some of the things that we did. It's been a long journey. We're now, 2021, but we started this, as I said, in early 2008. And again, it started with that one individual coming into my office and saying, what is the Jewish community prepared to do about this? So we have always been working to build our mental health services. And right around that time is when things like CAMH, the Center for Addictions and Mental Health in Toronto, was starting to become much more proactive, and co-occurring disorder initiatives were becoming much more active. And it was starting to become much more evident that best practice required not looking at mental health and addictions in silos. They were together. Individuals with addiction issues, I often say the addiction is not the issue. The addiction is a symptom of a deeper issue, usually some kind of mental health concern or some sort of self-medication. So we were doing a lot of work in those early days of just talking about it even within the agency, just getting our staff more comfortable with understanding the fact that an addictions lens had to be applied to any work that we were doing with families. And as it started to grow, myself as clinical director just didn't have enough time on my plate to be able to deal with the entire agenda. So I actually put in a request to our federation at an allocations meeting. And I was very frank about the types of things we were seeing in the addiction world. And it was a real eye-opener, talking about not just alcohol and marijuana, but crystal meth and heroin and crack and methamphetamine and some very serious drugs, and speaking about overdose. And they responded. They provided us with some additional core funding so that we could bring on we called it an addiction services coordinator. The primary role of that person was to do outreach in the community, to start to help us moving our strategic agenda forward in terms of training for staff in-house, educating and building awareness in the community, and starting to connect the pieces, the synagogues, the rabbis, the educators, the other community leaders. And I was obviously, at that time as clinical director, also trying to support and engage in that practice. We put out an ad for a focus group to see if there was anybody interested in coming forward to talk about what could the needs be and the response of JCFS to help with this. Surprisingly, we had 35 people show up in our boardroom. And so I was floored by that. And they were talking about the concerns that they had either personally or within their families. So it really, really hit home just how pervasive an issue this is, and that we just didn't talk about it. Nobody was talking about it at that time. And all we had to do was start talking about it a little bit, and families came forward. So the mental health coordinator was very primed at that time. We did a lot of community awareness building during those early years, and we brought in speakers from outside. Rabbi Mark Borovitz from a rehab center, a Jewish rehab center in Los Angeles called Beit Teshuvah, loosely translated the House of Repentance or Return. And they have a remarkable program. I highly recommend, if you're ever in LA, to visit them or look them up, or Google Rabbi Mark Borovitz and read his work. We brought in Rabbi Kerry Olitsky, who at the time was with the Jewish Outreach, what was then the Jewish Outreach Institute, and he had done a lot of writing on Jewish recovery practices. Again, we spoke with rabbis in synagogues, schools, the camps. We would have annual tables set up annually at certain times of year, Addictions Awareness Week, Mental Health Awareness Week, and we would engage people with information and flyers. We would do events, specific talks about certain things. The key takeaway for all of that was that ultimately we engaged probably 2 or 3 community champions, individuals who they themselves were in recovery, lived experience, or in their families. And they became a very strong partners and voices in speaking about this, both in their circles and in communities, to the point where one individual asked the rabbi in the largest conservative congregation here in Winnipeg if he could speak from the pulpit, and they allowed him to speak at Ne'ilah, the closing prayers of Yom Kippur, when there were probably 1,500 people in synagogue. And so you can't get at a time when they're talking about repentance and return. And he told his story. And these kinds of things have very significant impact. One of the outcomes of that early work was we weren't doing the direct clinical work at that time in terms of having an addictions program. But what we did do was we supported a self-help group. At the time, it was JACS. Unlike JACS Toronto, it was not Jewish Community Services, Addiction Community Services. The true name, Jewish addicts, Jewish alcoholics, chemically dependent persons and significant others, out of New York. That's a mouthful. They began running self-help meetings, 12-step meetings with a Jewish twist to them. We were helping with providing material, space, books, resources for them, and various kinds of supports. And it ebbed and flowed. Sometimes they'd have 12 people at a meeting, sometimes they'd have 2 people at a meeting. And it was primarily driven by 1 or 2 people. And a lot of the energy the steam came out of that. But as that was happening, we were building services in JCFS and the proficiencies of our staff. We struck up a strategic advisory group on addictions, which was essentially a steering group to help JCFS go forward and move forward. It was made up of people with lived experience, staff, professionals in the community, people from the university who had an interest in addictions work, and we brought some key people together to help advise us. We struck up, again, one of the speakers we brought in was part of a separate series where David and Nick Sheff. David Sheff had written a book. He lives in San Francisco, had written a book called Beautiful Boy about his son Nick and his son Nick's journey through addictions. And we brought them in, and we had 700 people at a talk at a large synagogue one evening, 1,100 high school students the next day were bussed in. And then we had them as part of a conference that we put on addictions, both for our community and our professionals. And then a second day was for just the general community, a general discussion on addiction. So we wanted to be seen as an agency that was putting ourselves on the agenda of the sector, the addiction recovery sector in the Winnipeg area. So that was very, very well attended. The Jewish Day was specifically for Jewish professionals in our community. I think we had about 65 people show up to that. And we focused primarily on why it was important to include the Jewish spiritual content in our recovery work, and why that was important to fill that piece of the recovery framework. Sometime after that, we realized, what, if you start talking about it and you build little things, people start to come. And we started to get calls from families about their loved ones. We started to get calls from individuals that they were looking for clinical support and additional help. That was when we brought on initially Carly. You saw Carly in the video. Carly spoke about her lived experience, and she was a trained addictions counselor. She has since moved on to another organization here in Winnipeg. And around 2018 or so, 2019, I think, we brought Dorit on. And it was happenstance that they had just moved. Her husband is from Winnipeg. They just moved back to Winnipeg. He took the pulpit as a rabbi at our other conservative synagogue. And when I heard Dorit's background and experience, it was a no-brainer. I approached her And as they say, it's been history. She's done great work in our program. And that those two positions, bringing on a clinical person, allowed us the ability now to do one-on-one work and to do more group work, but facilitated group work. And Dorit will talk probably more about some of that. With the advisory group and trying to just sort of lay the foundation, we've also done a few research projects, not just needs assessments in the community. We did do that. We did a couple of projects, one of which that's been published, I believe it was the Canadian Journal of Addictions. And we were looking at addictions in the Jewish community. One of them was looking at just what individuals knew and understood and their attitudes about addiction. And then a second project was more thematic, and it was looking at the experiences of Jews in recovery. And we had about 15 individuals from across Canada and the US who participated in interviews for that. We visited Beit Tshuva, the rehab center in LA. This was all part of our objective, our strategic objective to increase the capacity, professional capacity within our staff. We did a few things along that. 5 staff, let me think, 1, 2, 3, 4, yeah, four of us went to Los Angeles. They had a 5-day immersion program at Beit Tshuva for professionals. And we were able from 9 to 5 every day, and even earlier if you attended their morning tech study, we were able to see firsthand and hear firsthand about their model of delivering a Jewish service for recovery, addiction recovery. And it's an inpatient rehab center. So we began to bring things back to our staff. We had them trained in best practice, and not just our addictions team, all of our staff participated in these trainings. We developed and delivered trainings on trauma-informed care, motivational interviewing, so that staff could better understand the research and the science and the tools for helping people move through stages of change. I mentioned the Beit Tshuva work, and one of the things we brought back, and we were energetic at first, it has waned a little, and we've kind of found a bit of a balance, is their approach to text study at the center in LA, where they take, and Dorit will take us through a sample of this, where they take a piece of Jewish text, but not study it the way you might sit with a rabbi and study it, but rather look at it from a perspective and a lens of self-improvement, recovery, responsibility, and sort of, so it's sort of relevant and meaningful to a person in self-improvement. Beit Tshuva has a 3-pronged approach to addictions work. Every resident at their facility is assigned a therapist, an addictions counselor, and a spiritual counselor. Whether you're Jewish or not, you get the spiritual counselor, and you have to take part in their spiritual Jewish activities. It's not a religious institution, it's a spiritual institution. So we're kind of trying to build that here as well. We've pretty well got the addictions counselor piece down. We've got the therapy down for the most part when clients are ready for therapy. And we've been weaving the spiritual aspects into the framework. We as yet don't have a spiritual counselor per se to build a team for clients. So again, we're looking at those 3 aspects. We do a lot of one-on-one support and family supports. We've been doing a lot of work with the families as well. We understand that addiction is not just an individual disease, but a family disease. And so we also run groups and supports for parents and for siblings and family members. We've recently just completed a 10-week craft program, which is community reinforcement approach and family training. It's working with families on changing their patterns of communication and how they react to their family members so that they can be catalysts for helping their loved one be ready to access treatment, supports, rehab, etc. We've run some support groups and some educational groups. We've run a women's group, recovery group, which started as a focus group. We have learned that running a group, sometimes people don't register, but when we ask people for their advice, they come. And so we started it as a focus group, and then they chose to want to continue to meet on a regular basis. And we are currently, Dorit can speak more about our Recovery Talk group, which is an opportunity for folks in our program to come and again, talk recovery. We run educational programs at least once or twice a year. We did a program when marijuana was legalized. We've done a program for high school students, for parents, various educational types of events. We try to do those at least once a year. We just recently did one by Zoom with the folks from Jack's in Toronto last year. And so we try to have this multidisciplinary approach even in-house, because JCFS, much like Hamilton JFS, you have multiple programs within one agency. So we are able to apply other program supports to any client. We're able to provide them therapy, a mental health worker, referral to a psychiatrist, and referrals out in the community. So, I mean, that's sort of where we ended up. And so that now we're able to provide much more of a robust type of service. We still are challenged to get people to come to our program. But when it happens intensively. I can say that most of the work I did early on was in building the awareness and gaining the support and the understanding of our community leaders, whether it was Federation or our local foundation, whether it was synagogue leaders, whether it was other agency leaders or schools. And, I would love to say that was really hard work. People were ready to listen. I come back to the time when we had the focus group and 40 people showed up. We invited Rabbi Kerry Olitsky to come and do, the Federation actually brought him in, and we piggybacked and did a program in an evening, a dinner, a small dinner. We invited whoever wanted to come. And again, 40 individuals came to talk about recovery and addictions in their family. So again, I think if there's a few takeaways here from my end, it's start building the awareness out in the community. Start educating your community about it. We're here to help. I have a goal for a national voice. I've spoken in other communities about this. I continue to put it on the national and on our association, which is Canada-US agenda all the time. And if you build it, they will come. I can say that with a lot of confidence, and we're here to help. I'm mindful of the time. Let me turn it over to Dorit, who can explain a little bit more hands-on of the kinds of work we do.
Hi, good evening. So I think I will begin with this text that Alexis, are you able to share it on the screen? Okay, there it is. So I'm just going to read this piece of Talmud, some Gemara here, and give you a sense of a group that gathered, I think it was about 2 years ago, just a couple days before Hanukkah, and the conversation that we had. What is Hanukkah? So already there's a question there. What is Hanukkah? So if you can imagine about 9 individuals sitting around a table. For some of them, it's the first time they've ever learned Jewish text. For some of them, they have a lot of proficiency. They grew up and it was very natural for them to read Jewish text, to do study. But that initial question, what is Hanukkah? A conversation ensued before we even got into the actual text about what is Hanukkah, how some people have no clue where this thing called Hanukkah came from. They have felt rejected by the Jewish community. Every time they see Jewish holidays, think about Jewish things, they put up walls, they get anxious, they get a tightening in their chest. These are real things that came out in a conversation, while other members of the group were talking about, wow, Hanukkah is just pure light. I remember, you know, big family gatherings, time spent at synagogue. Where did that time go? So just with that first 3 words and a question mark, it elicits so much emotion, right? So I'm going to continue. Our rabbis taught on the 25th of Kislev commences the days of Hanukkah, which are 8, on which a lamentation for the dead and fasting is forbidden. For when the Greeks entered the temple, they defiled all the oils within it. And when the Hasmonean dynasty prevailed against and defeated them, they made search and found only 1 cruse of oil still containing the seal of the high priest, which contained sufficient oil for 1 day's lighting only. Yet a miracle occurred, and they lit the lamp for 8 days. The following year, these days were appointed a festival with the recital of Hallel and Thanksgiving. So I then asked the members of the group sitting together, what stands out for you in this text? What words, what images? Are there any questions that you have? And what came up with the words defiled, temple? Every single person at the table said defiled, that they had known that sense of being defiled, of being dirty, of feeling like they were worthless, and then connected it to temple. And I remember one young man said, my body is a temple and I have defiled it. Pretty powerful statement. They picked out prevailed, defeated. And those ideas were that they were there, that they had overcome something that could have killed them, that they had faced death. They had really faced death, and that they were still alive. They had defeated an enemy. They had prevailed with life. And the word miracle. Every single person at the table, -1, talked about having an intimate knowledge of what a miracle feels like they had actually felt miracles in their lives. And they talked from the perspective of having been so low, so like rock bottom, that they were more aware of miracles around them today. One young man told the story of meeting a stranger on the street, and that stranger told him to go to a place where they were handing out food. And when he went to that place where they were handing out food, he had met his best friend from when he was 7 years old. That was his miracle. I may take something like that and see it as a coincidence. But for him, having faced real depression, being thrown out of his home, having lived on the streets, not knowing where his next meal was going to come from, looking back, he's able to see miracles in his life everywhere. And the last part that came up was the idea of Thanksgiving, that Hanukkah is Thanksgiving. This isn't always something that we think about at Hanukkah time, but when we see the image of the Chanukiah, or the menorah, and the light for every day, that this can be a time of Thanksgiving, a time of gratitude. And so what we then did was we lit our Chanukiot, and because this was before Hanukkah time, we each lit 1 candle And as the candle was being lit, we went around and talked about what we were grateful for. And we decided as a group that the menorah, the Chanukiah, was really a sign of resilience. And that Hanukkah is sometimes a time when many Jewish community members feel abandoned and they have memories of being left out, but it can also be part of their inner work of building resilience. So I found this definition of resilience. Resilience is the psychological quality that allows some people to be knocked down by the adversities of life and come back at least as strong as before, rather than letting difficulties, traumatic events, or failure overcome them and drain their resolve. Highly resilient people find a way to change course, emotionally heal, and continue moving forward, moving toward their goals. So you can take the text down now so I can see more people. The problem with that definition of resilience, what's lacking there is the communal piece, because resiliency is so much about the individual. It's so much about those natural tools that are built into the sort of the normalized education and upbringing, all of those things that build us into people that are able to be well for the most part, right? But what I found in working with my clients in the Jewish community is at some point, and it's never easy to figure out what that point was, something didn't happen for them. There was a trauma, there was some way that they felt abandoned. And often that was by their family and by extension, the Jewish community. So this is an uphill battle sometimes to involve the as Al likes to say, the J in JCFS, to make that a priority. So it's not always a priority, right? There are clients for whom I'm doing recovery counseling, and they don't really have a whole lot of interest in talking about Judaism or spirituality at all. My job is often to help them see that spirituality isn't one thing, that purpose and meaning can be found through a lot of different avenues. We are very fortunate here in Winnipeg to be attached in many ways to the AFM, which is the Addiction Foundation of Manitoba. That's our provincially sponsored body that provides lots of low cost and free programming and treatment. And they are very big proponents at this point of the biopsychosocial spiritual approach. So it's an accepted thing here that spirituality is a big piece of recovery work. I'm going to just tell you a little bit about what I do day to day. So I work with clients who are at all different levels of their journey towards wellness. Some of them are heavily addicted to substances, are unhoused, maybe in very dangerous situations, and I am providing like crisis interventions constantly. Other clients are those who are in recovery and maybe they've had 15, 20 years in recovery. And it's just now hit them that there's a pandemic. Life has gotten that much harder, and they're noticing some of those things that have challenged them in the past are coming up for them again, and they're reaching out for support. I have shared clients. Many of my referrals come from mental health, our mental health department. And so this is my favorite thing, is when I get to work with a mental health worker in my agency, and we get to do a team approach, and we kind of wrap around those services. So in that case, I have a coworker who was really, looking at the social services that they have, that they can use, the employment, EIA, all of those kinds of things. And then I get to really just be that crucial support and take them through the recovery process. I also have clients that are referred by our child welfare system. So then I am working with a child welfare worker to support a parent who is often in danger of losing their children from their care. We have older adults. Our older adult services department will sometimes send a client my way. And I've had the opportunity to work with people who are addicted to shopping because isolation, and learning to use Amazon on your phone, and feeling hopeless can sometimes lead to a lot of shopping, right? And so then I'm taking them through the process of finding purpose and meaning in their lives, and what is the shopping doing for them, and how is it really dangerous to their welfare, right? The same goes for gambling. I don't know what gambling is like in your area of Canada, but it's pretty accessible here, and there's a lot of online gambling that happens too. So these are things that our older adults are often facing. Sometimes I am talking to our older adult social workers about a misuse of medications too. So all of these things are substance use related, behavioral addiction related, and it is constant. It's everywhere. If you look for it, you can't not see it. It's in every single population that we work with. So we could certainly be doing, there could be many more of me here, but I feel very fortunate to be doing this work. Yeah, so
Can I ask you too a question, because this question came up by one of our members of the audience, and I think it's I've seen this in other Jewish communities too, and it's the idea of ashunda, shame, hidden. So why do you think mental illness and addiction is always so hidden within the Jewish community? What do you think's going on there, and what have you guys found in your work?
Well, I mean, I can tackle that a little bit from sort of a community level, and I think you just hit it on the head. I think, the Jewish community is a proud community, and we have a lot to be proud of. We have a lot of success. We have a lot of positive things. We talk about being a light unto the nations, and you look at the number of Nobel Prize winners and all the stuff that we scream from the rooftops in terms of our accolades. And when you couple that, and I'm taking the Jewish perspective on this, when you couple that with our propensity for persecution, right? Somehow there's, and I put the psychology hat on here and saying somehow there's this psychological personality type that we have as a Jewish community that says we're ready to brag about our good stuff, but if we show our vulnerabilities, we're going to open ourselves up to attack. And what my experiences have shown over and over and over again is that when we talk about our vulnerabilities and we address them or work to address them, not only does that make us a stronger community, but it makes us a community to be respected and to be turned to. We get turned to. I've been approached by other non-Jewish community partners to talk about the work we're doing in mental health, in addictions, in child welfare, the work we do with older adult services. Why do we as a Jewish community build supports for our seniors when other communities are not doing that? And it's just, it speaks to our core values as a Jewish community that we should talk about those. And I mean, when Rabbi Borovitz speaks, he comes and he talks and he says, you know, there's no other commandment in the Torah, in the entire Bible, that is repeated more times than you need to care for the poor, the widow, the orphan, et cetera, right? And yet we don't publicize that we have those issues in our community. We talk about the soft ones, like of course we look after the old people, right? But do we look after our sick, our mentally ill, our addicts who have mental health issues, right? And Dorit, you touched on it when you said the communal trauma that people feel. We get people talking about, what is that? I call it Jewish trauma. And it's not, oh, my mother put a lot of guilt on me. No, it's when you walk into synagogue and you feel like an outcast. When you walk into your JCC and you're rejected and not allowed in, right? Mm-hmm. And granted, sometimes it's because the behavior is inappropriate, but those things create a spiritual and communal void for people. And that further drives them into a cycle of depression and isolation. We often talk that addiction is it's a disease of isolation. It's a disease of disconnection. And the funny sort of the kind of term that is always used, and the Rolling Stones said it in their song, I'm going to meet my connection, right? The drug dealer is your connection, but really that's your route to disconnection. And so the cure for addiction is connection, right? And if we can help connect people back to themselves, back to their families, back to their community, and to their spiritual roots, then we're helping people down the road of addiction recovery, and we're building a stronger community by doing that, which is why I'm so glad to see your federation head at the table here. Gustavo and I go way back. Our kids used to play together when they first moved to Canada, and really, it's got to be both a boots on the ground approach, but a communal approach. There has to be a communal understanding, because I guarantee you, if you go out to randomly talk to any Jewish family in your community, and if they were being honest, and you ask them, is there mental health and addictions anywhere in your family? Mm-hmm. And if they tell you no, they're lying. They're covering it up, because when you look at the statistics on mental health, the statistics on addiction, the likelihood is that you have a father, mother, sister, brother, cousin, friend who has somehow been touched in some way. And they may not even realize it. Oh, my cousin, he just smokes a lot of pot. That's how he copes. He's always been that way since high school. Since high school, he's 57 years old, So again, it's about talking about it. We have a job to reduce the stigma. And the more we talk about it, the more that question becomes less and less. It becomes easier to talk about it. Dorit, do you want to add anything there?
I think that there is a sense of, I don't know what it is, shame and guilt for not, I'll tell you, a lot of my clients have come from very connected families in the Jewish community. And the fact that they have not ended up being what their families expected them to be is they feel a whole lot of guilt, and their families do feel shame. Yeah, it's there. We have a great Jewish day school. There's been a Jewish day school here, many, and then one and whatever. I was shocked one day when I was sitting in my recovery talk group, with a 65-year-old now rabbi in the community and a 20-year-old young woman and two other people in between. They had all attended for some time the Jewish day school.
Jewish day school.
And for whatever reason, it hadn't worked out. The 65-year-old had been a little bit traumatized by the education, learning much later in life that he had ADHD, and the 20-year-old had felt like everyone in her class was wealthy and was going on trips to Bahamas and Mexico, and she was tired of it. You know, she was not in that situation, being raised by grandparents. She couldn't handle it anymore, and she left the community. You know, everybody has their unique situation, but as someone who really feels attached and connected to Jewish education and the Jewish community, I feel that pain. Like, we should never have lost anyone, right?
So there's a couple of other questions. I'm going to go to Gustavo, and then we'll go over to Rob's question.
And if I could just do a quick add-on to what Dorit just said, which is, so we do a lot of work helping the institutions like the camps and even the daycare, you know, the camps, the school, on becoming more mental health and addiction sensitive, and how we can help them and collaborate with them on supporting those students and families and youth in their programs. We're not just here to, you know, to provide the clinical work. We're here to provide organizational support to them as well.
Gustavo?
Yeah, sorry. No, I have a question. You know, something very interesting that you mentioned, you know, how sometimes we are like part of the problem, you know, in not knowing how to deal with people with addictions when they visit the JCC or they visit any Jewish event or sometimes the synagogues. I'm interested to know if your agency is offering like training workshops or any kind of instructions to all these professionals, all the people working on these organizations, to give them skills how to deal with these situations.
Yeah, I wouldn't say we have a packaged training that we do, but we have over the years definitely engaged them in conversations. I think I have every community rabbi has me on speed dial. You know, they probably have the red button on their phone that is direct line, Al Benarroch, JCFS. How do I've got a family just came to talk to me. So we've done, that is step one. I mean, if they even know what they don't know and to call, we've got success. And because we really looked at it as a lot of those community leaders are the first line.
Mm-hmm.
They're on the front line in the trenches. And if they're not even noticing what's going on, you know, Alexis, you said it, we don't even know what's going on. We don't ask, we don't pay attention. As soon as you start paying attention, people it starts coming forward. So we started with just having one-on-one conversations. We're happy to, I'd be happy for us to do something if your community rabbis wanted to, or if your organizational, whatever Jewish institutions you have in your community, if their board presidents and executive directors and rabbis wanted to have a talk with us, by all means, we would be happy to do that. We've also had Jack's Toronto involved. Ori Goldstein in Toronto is there. I think he's there ED now. He flew in when we did our Jewish Day, and he was fantastic. You know, he's there to also talk about these things. So you've got, you know, a 45-minute drive from Hamilton. You've got Jack's Toronto. While they're not doing Jewish recovery work per se, but they are a Jewish organization. So we'd be happy to do that. We did invite them to the workshop that we did. We've done work in the schools and the camps. Whenever we do a talk, we try to target the high school. And again, you start talking about it and people start to notice, even our own staff. They started to, oh, I never considered. So now when somebody comes in the door and they're depressed and they're coming for financial assistance, and we can't figure out why are you coming for financial assistance when you have income coming in, even if you're a retiree, something is not adding up. We immediately go to, there must be some addiction playing out here. whether it's shopping, whether it's alcohol, whether it's drugs, whether it's a child's addiction, who they're helping. And all of a sudden, it comes to the surface and becomes less hidden, even in our own assessment of clients when they first come through the door. So we've become very trauma informed, we become very poverty informed, we've become very domestic violence informed, and we've become very addiction informed in terms of the lenses we put on when we're working with people. And that takes time, but you got to start by talking about it, bringing in speakers to talk about it. You'll fill a synagogue, I guarantee it.
So I think that ties into Rob's question, and Rob had the question of, is addiction common in senior populations? Because you mentioned, Dorit, around older adults, and that's interesting. So if you can talk a little bit more about that.
Sure, and we also have Cheryl Hirsch-Cates on with us. She's, I don't want to put her on the spot, but Cheryl has been working with older adults for most of her career here at JCFS. I won't say how long it is, Cheryl. And she does manage both our addictions program, our mental health program, and our older adult service program. So Dorit and Cheryl, you might be able to comment on that. Who wants to jump in? Short answer is yes.
Okay, well, I can start by saying that, yes, we've noticed, as Al had said, before we became informed about addictions in our community, we noticed some things, but when we started looking more closely and seeing, we would see things like gambling a lot more. One of our workers had a client, a financial assistance client, that couldn't figure out what was going on and was shocked when it was discovered, because our financial assistance worker looked at the finances and said, well, maybe there's a gambling issue. And our worker was shocked that actually was the case. So we've learned that, there are a lot of seniors with addictions that whether it's alcohol related or gambling related or medication related, it's there. Not all want to engage with Dorit, although we're trying very hard to make that happen. But it's more than we would have expected.
Mm-hmm. And it's not, I mean, it's also hard substances. He's now since passed away, but there was a very famous individual in our community who was a client of the agency who at 82 years old still had a real attraction to crack cocaine. And he passed away a few years later, but this is an individual who was highly intelligent, highly educated. He was once he was once a sidekick with Johnny Cash, who would he was Johnny Cash's procurer, so to speak. And he moved out to LA. He used to go to parties with Elizabeth Taylor, and he had his mental health break at that time and came back home. And ever since that time had been in and out of transient housing, and continued to struggle with cocaine, and right up until he died, and at 85 plus years old. And we were this was pre us having formal addictions programming, but you could see the struggles that this individual had in the community and the rejection that he felt in the community at that age. So yes, in older adults, definitely.
It's interesting. I just want to say about one of the things that struck me, and Dorit, you commented on it about people feeling rejected. And we see that at HJFS in Hamilton too. And thank goodness for Federation's support of us. But Jews that come to us that say, I haven't been in a synagogue since my bar mitzvah, and I can still come in, and I still have your services. Am I still welcome here? Will people still understand me? And it's I find in the work, and you guys, it's about also repairing the relationship with Judaism.
Absolutely.
And it's not necessarily like, so, and it's like saying, taking them where they're at is, you want to connect with the JCC. If that's your connection with Judaism, great. If you want to connect with a rabbi, we'll connect you with a rabbi. If you don't want to connect with a rabbi, but repairing that kind of fractured relationship with their own ethno-cultural religious identity is part of the important work that's being done. And so when you guys are doing this stuff with addictions, it just blows my mind because it's so
Yes.
important.
Thank you. And you know, and the addicts, and especially those that are far along in their recovery, the very mature recovery individuals, and they exist in Hamilton. I'm sure of it. I'm 100% confident. They'll step forward, and because part of their recovery is giving back, and part of their recovery is contributing back. My father-in-law, you know, Allah Vashalom, you know, he passed away a few years ago. He was a 43-year veteran of AA, and over his years helped thousands and thousands of individuals. And when I started talking to him about, you know, should we, you know, what do you think about us doing some Jewish programming? At first he said, why? You know, there's AA, there's NA. I said, just, you know, come to one or two of the meetings and see what you think. Maybe you can help us out. He came in and he said, you know, in 43 years, he realized sitting in a room with other Jewish people, kibitzing in Yiddish, reading some of the Jewish texts he grew up with. He wasn't a religious man, but he grew up in the Jewish day school system. He found a home that helped supplement his recovery, you know, and then he became a mentor to many of our Jewish clients that have come through the doors. And he said it the best. He said, you know, coming forward is easy for him. And this is, again, the seasoned recovery person. He said, when I was 20 years old or 18 years old and falling over drunk at weddings, don't you think everybody knew I was an alcoholic? The only one who didn't know was me. So why wouldn't I come forward now and talk about what I was like then? They all knew I was an alcoholic. So, you know, it's a very interesting dynamic that happens, that we kind of help cover up the issue ourselves. If we're open to talk about it, people will come forward and they'll see the strength and the support they can get from their community. You know, our goal here, the big strategic initiative we're working on right now in Winnipeg, and this by no means is intended to be just a Winnipeg thing. My vision, and it's more than a vision, it's starting to move into action, is we're looking to hopefully build a Jewish sober living facility here in Winnipeg. It's nice and central. It will be a Jewish housing environment for individuals with mental health and addictions issues. Primarily the goal is for them, individuals transitioning out of rehab. Most rehab programs are 28 days at best. And the reason for that is because back in the day, that's all that insurance would pay for. So they developed 28-day recovery programs. Doesn't mean that it's the best way to do it. So people might cycle through 5 or 6 times, but it's only 28 days. So our goal is to have them be able to move into a Jewish milieu with housing that will provide them that Jewish facility, our mental health, addictions, counseling support, psychiatric support, outpatient if necessary, occupational therapy, life skills training, volunteer opportunities, and give them a place where they can live and continue to do the kind of work Dorit was talking about long term, a year and a half. They would have to pay rent. They might have to go to work. They might have to get family support. And I can think of a lot of Jews in Toronto, Montreal, Vancouver, Winnipeg, coming out of rehab who might look at a facility like this to go live for a year or a year and a half and continue to get supports. Now in the virtual world, it's easy, much easier. So my hope is that within 5 years, we've got something like that happening here in Winnipeg. Hopefully we break ground in a couple of years, and we've got lots and lots of support for this. So again, it speaks to us also. We're very collegial across the provinces. Like I said, I put this on our national agenda at the Jewish Family Service Network. It would be great if federations across Canada could talk about this. Synagogues across the country can talk about this and develop national networking. It is a pervasive problem, you know. I'm not saying this to end on a negative note, but it's not all roses, right? During the pandemic, we had one young individual who accidentally died by overdose in our community. We've been working with the family for many, many years. So it's a very real problem. So when we hear things like "it saved my life," when we hear, you know, we may only have 5 or 6 people coming to a group, but if we've saved one individual from that crisis, from that half a step away from an overdose, you know, we've saved, what do they say? You save one person, you've saved the whole world. So I was messaging with Alexis here that this is some of the most rewarding work I've ever done. This and the work we did with the Yazidi refugees. Some of the most rewarding work I've ever done. And for a Jewish community to embrace it has been very, very important.
We are, I am gonna, you know, and Gustavo is gonna do the official thank you. But I do want to say I've said this before, but how important the work is you're doing. As someone who works in a community where we have just started the conversation around issues, you are a bright light in Canada, in the Canadian Jewish community, in the Canadian Jewish Family Services world, and it matters and it makes an impact. I mean, when you were talking about building the capacity of our lay leaders and our community members, I can say Gustavo's mind was going, and probably my mind was going, about how important it is. So you are tremendous, and the fact that you took the time to talk to us about this, the fact that you have let us to record it, and we will be sharing it. It is amazing work, and I couldn't think of a better way to honor National Addictions Awareness Week than talking about it within a Jewish context. And again, it's such innovative work. It's just really incredible. So thank you.
There's a ton of resources out there on Jewish addictions, and books, writers, authors, webinars, seminars. So happy to share.
Amazing.
So and all your stuff, you know, many of you knows my story arriving to Winnipeg 25 years ago in the middle of the winter. First people at the airport, of course, people from the Federation and Jewish Family Services. So that's something that, you know, you didn't save my life, but you make my life much easier and much better. So that's something that I always appreciate for your agency. And was always like Winnipeg in my mind was always a role model as a community, as a federation, and all the stuff that you are doing. We always talk to Alexis about how to copy you in a good way and how to get inspired by you. So thank you so much for this lesson, this beginning of a relationship. I think we have like a great future ahead together, you know, by our federation supporting our Jewish Family Services and you supporting our Jewish Family Services as well. I really appreciate that, and I really thank you for all your help. Thank you, and thank you everyone for attending this important conversation.
And again, we're here at any time.
Okay.
And we're just a phone call away.
Thank you.
I'll stop recording, so if people have any quick questions, they can show their image without being